Building Change is a unique partnership of all the schools of architecture across Ireland to review the curriculum and address the sustainable development goals, in particular that of climate action and sustainable housing. It's been a journey that has been a collective mission on behalf of all academic colleagues, partners, external communities, and our students to make change happen that's relevant and addresses the real world challenges.
Today, we're bringing together representatives from all of the partner universities within the Building Change project in order to reflect upon the studio pilots and gap analysis. The workshops are facilitated by ACAN, the Architects Climate Action Network. We're exploring 6 themes: housing and urbanism, materials and adaptive reuse, politics and wider systems, collaborative working, digital and data, and ecology and regenerative design. The aim of today is to analyse key learnings from the work completed so far, to produce learning outcomes for each of the 6 themes that we're exploring, and to work out how to implement these changes into the curriculum.
What we came into this workshop today, which has proved really, really valuable, is, I guess, the experience of the first couple of years of upskilling and of starting to integrate this content into our program. And so this workshop comes at this juncture where we're able to speak about, I guess, what we have learned from what we've done, and also able to articulate what we see as the challenges and opportunities of this next phase, which is the curriculum redesign. We had been doing quite a lot of work already on looking at the map of our curriculum, and the challenge always is you really don't want to relinquish anything that's already there, but there's a whole lot of new methods, new content that you also want to bring in. And I think what's been useful about this day is that we've kind of broken that content into different themes. And then with each of those themes, we start to identify, headline, we're thinking of them as graduate attributes. And so once you've identified those headlines, you're then able to track that back across the 3 years of a program. What one would hope would be sustainable would be that you've got a much clearer, more coherent map of a curriculum that the students are navigating. So they know where they are, they know the expectations, and they know the purpose of what they're learning at each point in that journey. We really have benefited enormously from this project in UCD, being able to think more about how we value and what we value in architecture, thinking more carefully about resources and how we use them, thinking more carefully about the built fabric we already have, that we've inherited, and finding ways of thinking, ways of analysing, ways of measuring, and ways of designing that respond to and understand those values. I think from the point of view of myself and colleagues who are engaged in the project, who are able to take on new methods of teaching, acquire new knowledge, acquire new skills, and think about how we can meet the challenges of climate change through what we teach and how we teach. And I would say that that's something that the students are starting to benefit from as well. Things that we've been trying out in the studio pilots, in other parts of the program, the experts and the other voices that we've been able to bring into the school. So all told, I would say that there's already quite a significant culture shift. And now our challenge will be to embed that fully into our program so that it's sustainable and keeps going beyond the lifetime of the project.
I think the benefit for students is that the studio pilot projects act as sort of flagship projects within the school. And students can see that they're involved in something that's at the forefront of tackling both climate crisis and housing crisis. While our pilot projects and studio work is evolving and has adapted under the Building Change project, we're also undergoing a full programme revision. One of the main things that I think has had an impact here is we've invited in external critical friends. So those can be architects in practice, educators, theoreticians within Irish architectural practice, but also international guests. And they have built a kind of network for the school internationally, but also allowed us time and space to reflect on what we do and how we do it. It's also created a group of very engaged students and students who will take that responsibility out into their careers. We've also been very careful to try and work with our graduates and alumni so that we're not just looking at the existing student body and we're thinking about people who are out in the workplace and their potential to impact change.
We wanted to share how we were approaching our pilot study, which is in its second reiteration. We're piloting a very integrated studio. We're a new school of architecture and we're building on our curriculum. We discussed the challenges that we face, the positive outcomes, what we hope to do next semester, and also then how we hope that that model will trickle down to previous years. And it's an experiment, and it has been challenging, but it's getting positive feedback from other staff and other partner universities. There's general agreement that, it goes beyond pilot studies, curriculum change, that although that was the driving force behind this project, and it still is in so many ways, that there's so many other factors in relation to curriculum change. And it's something we observed ourselves. So it's reassuring to hear other schools are also observing this. So it has kind of given us a certain guide and reassured us that we're on the right path. In our course, we've recognised through our collaboration with industry and through our own design teaching that digitisation and use of appropriate data is forming more and more part of the methods of teaching. It has to be at an appropriate level, that there's a balance struck between analogue design and digitisation and digital design. So we're developing a model of sketch, scan, draw, and this is part of this reiterative model that students can think on different levels. They can make informed decisions at an early stage, particularly in relation to embodied carbon. We would like to think that in years to come, the graduates, this will be one of the skills that they have leaving the university that will prepare them for practice. We're also using digitalisation skills in relation to circularity, reuse. We're putting a huge emphasis on design for disassembly, that materials will have a passport, that buildings will have a value, and we're trying to get students to think that their building is part of the material's life. It will move on to something else afterwards. The ability to actually record materials and think about this relies heavily on digitisation. Also, we're promoting, particularly in our pilot study, modern methods of construction. So we've done research studies abroad with students. We've gone to modular factories. We've gone to sites that have implemented modular exemplar designs. And it's become very apparent from talking to the architects and getting workshops with them that the digitisation process of that modular delivery was essential. It could not have been done without it.
There is a mindset shift that is happening among students, and the pilots help a little bit to see exactly how you might do that and focus how you might do it. So it gives students some kind of constraint, I think, within which to tackle this slightly overwhelming subject matter. You can see that there's an empowerment around that in being able to say, okay, I saw how I could tackle some of this and I've done it in this specific way. I think one of the things that came across very strongly was an idea about equipping students in terms of how to critically assess their own work and the work of others, and critical thinking and how that might need to be taught. There are wider systems at play in terms of how we might tackle housing crisis and climate action. Politics, regulatory issues, different vulnerable user groups, say, within society. The way that we're currently tackling it in our pilot project in year 2 is through working directly with live clients that are part of those wider systems. They come in and present, say, at the very beginning, they present in terms of the brief. So the brief comes first from the perspective of who the potential users are, what the needs are, and what the kind of wider context you're working into is. And then those clients stay involved right through the design project and come to a series of reviews. And another, I suppose, key thing that we've noticed in recent years, and we had very strong student kind of activist involvement in the last number of years in Cork, is trying to capture students' own agency and stuff that comes from a kind of student-led approach to tackling wider issues, and listening to how it is the students are reading these things, and also learning to work collaboratively was something that was, I suppose, a skill that could be taught as well, and that those are both kind of really important things in terms of having these conversations.
Part of today was reflecting back on what we've done and looking at the studio pilots and looking at different ways that different universities have done that. So we've done it in very specific ways in UL. In the other schools, they've done it in different ways. And actually the conversation about how that's, where is it working really well, where is it not working so well, that's a really interesting conversation to have between academic institutions. I think there's a few areas of focus for a lot of the schools, for instance, on digital modelling, on LCA calculations that different people are doing it in different ways. And that's solidifying more and more into how it should be done in the different schools. 2 years ago, there was 90 ways you could have done it. Now it seems like there's 1 or 2 ways. So that's been interesting to see that solidify and become, quite a set thing. The feedback from the students has been that it's the more short, sharp, intense workshops have been really good, where they get a lot of new learning out of a very injected piece of teaching. Students are going into an environment where the world that they will be walking into hasn't yet been created, and we need to prepare them for that. What is life going to look like? What are buildings going to look like? What materials will we use in 20 or 30 years' time? We're really catching up to other industries, and we have such a huge impact on climate change, on carbon, based on the materials we use every day. So thinking about embodied carbon of a material is really important, but also we need to think of our students thinking about new materials that haven't yet been invented. So bio-based materials, materials that would normally end up in waste to provide materials for building stock. And that's something that's really interesting and something we've been doing a lot in UL. And that's an area that's kind of fascinating to think about as an educator.
The studio projects are a challenge. It's a different emphasis on the project. And what that means is on the early stages of the design, there's an awful lot more analysis, a different type of analysis that needs to be done into site, not just something that's confined by a red line or by buildings around it, but as a site within a town, that's within a region, that's sitting on the planet. So you're talking about materials, how they get to site, where they come from, how they're manufactured, the geological cycle that brought them into creation in the first place. It opens it up to a whole other set of disciplines, of a whole other world of information and knowledge. So in that sense, it's difficult for the students because they need to be kind of brought into this territory slowly over the course of the first, second, third, fourth years of college. And as an educator, that has its own challenges. How do you do that in a graduated way where it doesn't turn them off, where they don't get lost, where they can still produce coherent architectural design in a way that's traditionally considered to be good? One of the things I think that we have brought, that we have discovered in terms of curriculum change, is this idea of integration, of different modules working together, of directly supporting each other, so that there is knowledge resource being developed in one module, which can plug into another module, take the pressure off. So from the point of view of Studio as a standalone module, still space for students to design, where they can bring analytical understanding from a technical module into that. I think overall SETU is benefiting. There's a change in the culture of the way things are taught in the college. There's more of a kind of a collaborative atmosphere that's developing between different years, between different disciplines within the college.
As an educator, it has enabled me to collaborate widely with the other schools of architecture. We've learned how they're approaching their design curriculum, things that worked for them, things that didn't work for them. And it has been reassuring, I suppose, that the challenges we faced aren't unique to us, that they're across the board, and we're working together with our colleagues in other universities to try and best resolve them.
Being given a specific kind of a license or like a challenge to question what it is that we do, I think that's something that's a big benefit and that we otherwise wouldn't probably make time for. Things like the shared events like today are really crucial, where you get that chance to actually engage in the conversation directly.
It's absolutely cutting edge. Industry is doing the same thing as academia. So we're trying to figure out how that all works together and how we teach our students. So being able to talk to the universities, being able to have the time to do that is really important.
When we come together, I think, of course, the first thing that you are reminded of is the fact that there's 6 schools working on this in parallel, that each is distinct in its approach and what it's bringing to bear. You do become aware again of the potential of those 6 schools acting together. And maybe that's something that we need to think about a bit more proactively in this last stage of the project, is how do we make common cause and how do we maybe, achieve something at a greater scale by working together.
I think building change has given great momentum and cohesion to the fact that we all need to work together to address the climate crisis and the housing crisis. And we're really careful that the shifts that we've seen happening through the pilot project and through building change become long-lasting, embedded change.